Let me ask you something that's been haunting me. What really happened during those 3 days? You know the ones. The 3 days between that Friday afternoon when the sky went black and Sunday morning when the stone rolled away. The Apostles' Creed slips it in almost casually. He descended into hell. 4 words, that's it. But have you noticed how quickly preachers skip past this line, how theologians clear their throats and change the subject? Think about it. We have detailed accounts of the crucifixion, every lash, every nail, every word from the cross. We have multiple testimonies of the resurrection. Angels, empty tombs, appearances to disciples. But those 3 days in between, silence. A deliberate, deafening silence that should make us suspicious. What are we not being told? There's something here, something that makes the comfortable uncomfortable. The Greek says katelthonda ista katotata. Thus Christ went down into the lowest depths. The Latin is even more precise. Descendit ad inferos. Not infernos, the burning place, but inferos, those below, the dead, all of them. This distinction matters. We're not talking about some medieval torture chamber with demons and pitchforks. We're talking about the realm of shades, the democracy of death, where all humanity waited in shadow. Sheol, Hades, the underworld. That liminal space between being and non-being, where consciousness flickers like a candle in vast darkness that seems to have no end whatsoever. Why does this matter now? Because I'm convinced that buried in this forgotten doctrine is a map for the journey every soul must undertake. Not up toward light, but down into necessary darkness. Not the ascent we celebrate, but the descent we fear. And maybe, just maybe, the descent is the real work. Maybe Nietzsche was right when he spoke about downgoing in Zarathustra. Augustine himself confessed puzzlement. In his 99th epistle he asks, Quis ergo nisi infidelis negaverit fuisse apud inferos Christum? Who then but an unbeliever has denied that Christ was in hell? But notice Augustine's careful phrasing. He doesn't claim to understand what happened there. He simply insists it did happen. Even the greatest theological mind of the early church stood at the edge of this mystery and admitted bewilderment. That should tell us something. The Westminster Larger Catechism tries to explain it. Christ's humiliation after his death consisted in his being buried and continuing in the state of the dead and under the power of death till the 3rd day. Under the power of death, not triumphant, not in control, subject to death's dominion, like every human who ever lived. But what was he doing there? Before peeling the layers of this question, let me introduce myself. I am Irrevelato. I reveal the secrets you deserve to know, the lives and stories of luminaries and gods, the questions that demand to be sought, the full spectrum of the psyche. I've created quite a large catalogue of videos spanning philosophy, psychology, religion, esotericism, mysticism, metaphysics, and symbolism. And to the limits of my abilities, this catalogue aims to cover everything there is to know about our realities. The essence of living a spectacular life, all in one. My obsessive compulsion is believing that philosophy can rise again to its former glory, mainly because disparate elements cannot function properly if they don't understand that they are part of a body, of a structure, of a map. We need unity and diversity. So welcome. Thank you for being here. Take a seat, get comfortable. It's usually a hell of a ride. If these contemplations strike you as worthy endeavors, consider supporting their continuation via the links in the description. Either way, the doors are open and the fun is about to start. Now let's get back to our question. What was Christ doing in the underworld? Carl Jung, who cartographed the dark continents of the soul, offers an interpretation in Liber Primus that should shake you awake. After his death, Christ had to journey to hell, otherwise the ascent to heaven would have become impossible for him. Christ first had to become his Antichrist, his underworldly brother. Stop, read that again. The Savior had to become the destroyer. The light had to become darkness. It's the psychological truth hidden in orthodox doctrine. The coincidentia oppositorum, the union of opposites that mystics have always known, is the key to transformation. You cannot integrate what you refuse to become. You cannot redeem what you will not touch. Jung continues, claiming direct experience of this mystery. No one knows what happened during the 3 days Christ was in hell. I have experienced it. The men of yore said that he had preached there to the deceased. What they say is true, but do you know how this happened? It was folly and monkey business, an atrocious hell's masquerade of the holiest mysteries. Folly, monkey business, in the cosmic drama of salvation. Yes, because, and this is crucial, transformation doesn't follow our scripts. It makes fools of our theologies. The holy becomes ridiculous. The profound becomes absurd. This is what the cross itself teaches. God dies like a criminal. The king reigns from a torture device. Victory looks exactly like defeat. Jung asked the question that should haunt us: how else could Christ have saved his Antichrist? Read the unknown books of the ancients, and you will learn much from them. The unknown books, the Apocrypha, the texts the church fathers buried because they were too strange, too transformative, too dangerous for comfortable faith. The Gospel of Nicodemus, the Acts of Pilate, the Questions of Bartholomew. Texts that describe battles and infernal dialogues, where Satan argues jurisprudence with Christ, and death itself trembles at the invasion of life. Are these fantasies? You decide. Yet they are attempts to articulate something that defies articulation. The moment when absolute opposites unite, when the structure of reality itself undergoes renovation. Scripture provides only fragments, but what fragments? Verses 18 to 20 from 1 Peter chapter 3 reveal. For Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the Spirit, in which he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison, because they formerly did not obey, when God's patience waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is, 8 persons, were brought safely through water. Spirits in prison. Think about that. Who are these prisoners? The text continues in chapter 4, verse 6. For this reason the gospel was preached also to those who are dead, that they might be judged according to men in the flesh, but live according to God in the Spirit. The dead, all of them, from Adam onward, waiting. For what? For this moment. For this unprecedented divine invasion of death's realm. The early church fathers debated fiercely about who these spirits were. Some said they were the fallen angels mentioned in Genesis 6. Others insisted they were the disobedient from Noah's time. But the text is broader than either interpretation. The gospel was proclaimed even to the dead. Not some dead. The dead. Death's entire constituency and domain. Matthew's gospel also records something extraordinary at the moment of Christ's death. And behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth shook and the rocks were split. The tombs also were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised, and coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. Did you catch that? The dead walked Jerusalem's streets, a reality rupture. The boundary between worlds became permeable. The veil tore in the temple and the cosmos itself. The Paschal sermon of St. John Chrysostom describes it thus: Hades was in an uproar, having been eclipsed. It was in an uproar because it is mocked. It was in an uproar, for it is destroyed. It was in an uproar, for it is abolished. It was in an uproar, for it is made captive. The entire architecture of death began to crumble. Jung poses the question that cuts to the heart. If we do not have the depths, how do we have the heights? Without descending to the absolute bottom, how can we claim to have touched the absolute top? The Old Testament knew this. Sheol was the democracy of death, righteous and unrighteous together in shadowy existence. As the psalmist cries, "If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there." But this is different. This isn't God being present in Sheol. This is God entering Sheol as one of its inhabitants, subject to its laws, bound by its limitations. The Creator becomes creature even in death. The Gospel of Nicodemus, a strange apocryphal text condemned by many, treasured by some, gives us the cosmic drama in full theatrical glory. Listen to this dialogue between hell and Satan. And when all were in such joy, came Satan, the heir of darkness, and said to Hades, O all-devouring and insatiable, hear my words. There is of the race of the Jews one named Jesus, calling himself the Son of God. And being a man, by our working with them, the Jews have crucified him. And now when he is dead, be ready that we may secure him here. For I know that he is a man, and I heard him also saying, My soul is exceeding sorrowful, even unto death. He has also done me many evils when living with mortals in the upper world. For wherever he found my servants, he persecuted them. And whatever men I made crooked, blind, lame, lepers, or any such thing, by a single word he healed them. And many whom I had got ready to be buried, even these through a single word he brought to life again. This is profound theological irony. Satan, the father of lies, speaks a half-truth that becomes his undoing. Yes, Jesus is a man, but not only a man. Hell's fundamental miscalculation rests on this incomplete understanding. Satan boasts of working with the Jews to crucify Christ, not realizing he's orchestrating his own defeat. Like a chess player sacrificing his queen to achieve checkmate, the divine strategy uses evil's own machinations against itself. The gospel then goes like this. Satan says, O all-devouring and insatiable Hades, art thou so afraid at hearing of our common enemy? I was not afraid of him, but worked in the Jews, and they crucified him, and gave him also to drink gall with vinegar. Make ready then, in order that you may lay fast hold of him when he comes. Hades answered, Heir of darkness, son of destruction, devil. Thou hast just now told me that many whom thou hadst made ready to be buried, be brought to life again by a single word. And if he has delivered others from the tomb, how and with what power shall he be laid hold of by us? For I not long ago swallowed down one dead Lazarus by name, and not long after, one of the living by a single word dragged him up by force out of my bowels. And I think that it was he of whom thou speakest. If therefore we receive him here, I am afraid lest perchance we be in danger even about the rest. For lo, all those that I have swallowed from eternity, I perceive to be in commotion, and I am pained in my belly. And the snatching away of Lazarus beforehand seems to me to be no good sign. For not like a dead body, but like an eagle, he flew out of me. For so suddenly did the earth throw him out. Wherefore also I adjure even thee, for thy benefit and for mine, not to bring him here. For I think that he is coming here to raise all the dead. And this I tell thee, by the darkness in which we live, if thou bring him here, not one of the dead will be left behind in it to me. Isn't this language visceral and striking? Hell itself has indigestion. The cosmic order is literally upset. Hades experiences something unprecedented. Fear. The realm that inspired terror in all mortals now trembles. Notice how Hades describes Lazarus flying out like an eagle, not creeping like a shade, not shambling like a zombie, but soaring with resurrection vitality. Death's dominion is already compromised, its subjects are becoming unruly. And there's another aspect worthy of your consideration. The phrase, by the darkness in which we live, reveals something essential about the nature of evil. It exists in and depends upon darkness. Not just physical darkness, but epistemological darkness, the inability to comprehend light. Hades swears by the darkness. It's all he knows, all he has. This oath by ignorance becomes a prophecy of his defeat. And then it is announced, while Satan and Hades were thus speaking to each other, there was a great voice like thunder saying, Lift up your gates, O ye rulers, and be ye lifted up, ye everlasting gates, and the King of glory shall come in. The language echoes Psalm 24, but with terrifying immediacy. Hell itself panics. When Hades heard, he said to Satan, Go forth, if thou art able, and withstand him. Satan therefore went forth to the outside. Then Hades says to his demons, Secure well and strongly the gates of brass and the bars of iron, and attend to my bolts, and stand in order, and see to everything. For if he come in here, woe will seize us. Notice the technical detail. Gates of brass, bars of iron, multiple locks. This is maximum security, the Alcatraz of death. But against what's coming, these fortifications are tissue paper. The obsessive detail about security measures reveals hell's desperation. But there's deep irony here. These fortifications were designed to keep souls in, not to keep God out. Hell never conceived of invasion from outside. It's like a prison preparing for a riot while a rescue team approaches from above. The very strength of these barriers testifies to their ultimate uselessness against divine love. The Paschal Sermon of St. John Chrysostom provides a different angle. Hell took a body and discovered God. It took earth and encountered heaven. It took what it saw and was overcome by what it did not see. This is the divine ambush. Hell thought it was receiving another corpse. Instead, it swallowed divinity hidden in humanity. The trap springs from inside. But what force can hold against this invasion? The Gospel of Nicodemus continues. There came then again a voice saying, "Lift up the gates." Hades, hearing the voice the second time, answered as if forsooth he did not know, and says, "Who is this King of glory?" The angels of the Lord say, "The Lord strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle." And immediately with these words the brazen gates were shattered, and the iron bars broken, and all the dead who had been bound came out of the prisons, and we with the and the King of glory came in the form of a man, and all the dark places of Hades were lighted up. Every lock shattered, every chain broken, every prisoner freed. This is the demolition of cosmic architecture itself. But here's what strikes me. The repetition of the question, who is this King of glory? This repeated question echoes through salvation history. The Philistines asked it when the Ark of the Covenant devastated their god Dagon. Herod asked it in terror at Christ's birth. Pilate wondered it during the trial. Now hell asks it in the moment of its unmaking, but note, hell must ask. The question itself opens the door. Hell's interrogation becomes an unwitting invitation. Hell genuinely doesn't recognize what's invading it. Death has never encountered life in its pure form. The darkness literally cannot comprehend the light. Light doesn't negotiate with darkness, it simply displaces it. The illumination of Hades represents more than physical light. It's the light of consciousness, revelation, truth penetrating the realm of shadows and illusions. Every hidden thing becomes visible. Every chain is revealed as ultimately imaginary. Every prisoner sees the door that was always there. The Orthodox tradition preserves this moment in their iconography with theological precision that takes your breath away. Picture it. Christ in blazing white robes, standing on crossed bronze gates, hell's own portals now forming the instrument of salvation. But the detail that always stops me, he grasps Adam and Eve by their wrists, not their hands, their wrists. A hand clasp suggests partnership, cooperation, and mutual reaching. But wrists? That's rescue of the drowning. That's pulling the unconscious from wreckage. The theological point is devastating. Humanity cannot cooperate in its own salvation. We are dead weight that must be hauled from the pit. And notice who gets rescued first. Adam and Eve, the original sinners, the ones who started this whole catastrophe. Grace doesn't begin with the righteous, it begins with the failures. The whole human family crowds around. David with his harp, Solomon in royal purple, John the Baptist still damp from Jordan's waters, prophets and patriarchs, and unnamed multitudes. The Orthodox liturgy for Holy Saturday captures this moment. The priest strews laurel leaves throughout the church, hell's scattered victory wreaths, while the vestments change from funeral purple to resurrection white mid-service. The change happens during the gospel reading. One moment the church mourns in darkness, next it explodes in paschal glory. No transition, no gradual brightening, just sudden absolute reversal, because that's how resurrection works. So long. Since Eden's gates closed, every human generation has been waiting in the shadows for this moment. The Catholic Catechism states it with lapidary clarity. Jesus did not descend into hell to deliver the damned, nor to destroy the hell of damnation, but to free the just who had gone before him. But Jung pushes further. What if the distinction between damned and just isn't as clear as we'd like? What if we all contain both? What if integration requires rescuing our own damned aspects? Here's where theology becomes almost unbearably strange. Jung writes, But the serpent is also life. In the image furnished by the ancients, the serpent put an end to the childlike magnificence of paradise. They even said that Christ himself had been a serpent. I know it sounds like blasphemy, but stay with me. Numbers 21 records a bizarre episode. Poisonous serpents attack Israel in the wilderness. God's remedy? Moses must craft a bronze serpent and lift it on a pole. Anyone bitten who looks at it lives. John's Gospel makes the connection explicit. Just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. The poison becomes the cure. The curse becomes a blessing. The symbol of humanity's fall becomes the means of redemption. Think deeper. What is it about the serpent that carries such power? In every ancient culture, the serpent represents transformation because it sheds its skin. It is death and rebirth in an endless cycle. It moves between worlds, above ground and below, light and dark. It carries venom that can kill or, properly processed, can heal. The early church fathers wrestled mightily with this serpent symbolism. Justin Martyr, writing in the 2nd century in dialogue with Trypho, chapter 94, declared, "Just as God commanded the sign to be given by the brazen serpent, and yet is guiltless, so even in the law does a curse lie against men who are crucified. Yet a curse does not lie any longer against the Christ of God, for by him he saves all them that have done deeds that deserve a curse." Notice Justin's careful navigation here. He acknowledges the paradox. God commands the making of a graven image, which the law forbids. The crucified are cursed under the law, yet Christ's crucifixion removes the curse. Justin sees the pattern. Divine wisdom operates through contradiction. The forbidden becomes commanded. The curse becomes a blessing. But he stops short of the full implication, that Christ becomes the serpent itself. Tertullian, in Against Marcion, pushed further, making the connection disturbingly direct. Did he not here also intend to show the power of our Lord's cross, whereby that old serpent the devil was vanquished, whereby also to every man who was bitten by spiritual serpents, but who yet turned with an eye of faith to it, was proclaimed a cure from the bite of sin and health forevermore? Come now, when you read in the words of David, how that the Lord reigneth from the tree, I want to know what you understand by it. Perhaps you think some wooden king of the Jews is meant, and not Christ, who overcame death by his suffering on the cross and thence reigned. Now, although death reigned from Adam even to Christ, why may not Christ be said to have reigned from the tree, from his having shut up the kingdom of death by dying upon the tree of his cross? Tertullian's rhetoric burns with paradoxical fire. The old serpent is vanquished by becoming a new serpent. The tree of knowledge that brought death becomes the tree of the cross that brings life. Death's kingdom is overthrown by death itself. Tertullian revels in these inversions, seeing in them the signature of divine strategy. Yet even he hesitates at the ultimate identification, Christ as serpent, preferring to speak of Christ conquering the serpent. Augustine, in Tractates on John, Tractate 12, brought philosophical precision to the paradox. What are the biting serpents? Sins from the mortality of the flesh. What is the serpent lifted up? The Lord's death on the cross. For as death came by the serpent, it was figured by the image of a serpent. The serpent's bite was deadly. The Lord's death is life-giving. A serpent is gazed on that the serpent may have no power. What is this? A death is gazed on that death may have no power. But whose death? The death of life. If it may be said, the death of life. Aye, for it may be said, but said wonderfully. But should it not be spoken, seeing it was a thing to be done? Shall I hesitate to utter that which the Lord has deigned to do for me? Is not Christ the life? And yet Christ hung on the cross. Is not Christ life? And yet Christ was dead. But in Christ's death, death died. Augustine's language strains at the limits of logic, the death of life. He knows he's saying something that shouldn't be sayable, yet must be said. His repetitions, death, 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 beat like a funeral drum, until suddenly they transform into resurrection proclamation. Death dies. The serpent's power breaks when we gaze upon the serpent. Augustine grasps that the cure requires assuming the form of the disease, but notice his philosophical caution, if it may be said, as if even he trembles before the full implications. But it was Gregory of Nyssa, in the life of Moses, who perhaps came closest to Jung's insight, writing, "The change from a rod into a snake should not trouble the lovers of Christ, as if we were adapting the doctrine of the Incarnation to an unsuitable animal. For the truth himself, through the voice of the gospel, does not refuse a comparison like this in saying, "And the Son of Man must be lifted up, as Moses lifted up the serpent in the desert." The teaching is clear. For if the father of sin is called a serpent by Holy Scripture, and what is born of the serpent is certainly a serpent, it follows that sin is synonymous with the one who begot it. But the apostolic word testifies that the Lord was made into sin for our sake by being invested with our sinful nature. This figure, therefore, is rightly applied to the Lord. For if sin is a serpent and the Lord became sin, the logical conclusion should be evident to all. By becoming sin, he became also a serpent, which is nothing other than sin. For our sake he became a serpent that he might devour and consume the Egyptian serpents produced by the sorcerers. Gregory takes the step others feared to take. His logic is relentless. If sin equals serpent, and Christ became sin, 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21, then Christ became serpent. No metaphor, no hedging, actual identification. But Gregory adds a crucial insight. Christ becomes a serpent to devour serpents. Like the staff of Moses that became a snake and swallowed the Egyptian magician's snakes, Christ assumes the form of what destroys us to destroy the destroyer. This is the unexpected infiltration. God enters the system of death from within to collapse it. Do you see the progression? From juridical paradox, Justin, to cosmic reversal, Tertullian, to philosophical limit, Augustine, to complete identification, Gregory. The Church Fathers spiral ever closer to the scandalous truth. Christ must become what cursed us to free us from the curse. Early Christian sects, the ones the Orthodox bishops tried to silence, spoke of Christ as the good serpent who brings true knowledge. The Ophites, from the Greek ophis, serpent, saw the Eden serpent as a liberator, freeing humanity from a jealous demiurge's prison, heretical, absolutely, but containing a psychological truth that makes us squirm. Sometimes what saves us first appears as what destroys us. But why use this symbol at all? Why not something less problematic, less associated with evil? Because, and this is the radical insight, salvation doesn't come through avoiding the problematic, but through transforming it. Thomas Aquinas, trying to maintain orthodoxy while acknowledging mystery, wrote that Christ descended into the hell of the lost in his essence, but only by the effect of his passion. Even the angelic doctor had to perform theological gymnastics here. The psychological truth Jung uncovers is this: Christ must become the serpent because we must integrate our own serpent nature, our capacity for both poison and medicine, destruction and renewal, wisdom and deception. The shadow isn't eliminated, it's transformed into a servant of wholeness. Liberation carries a price that Jung describes brilliantly in Liber Novus. Hell is when you must think and feel and do everything that you know you do not want. Hell is when you know that your having to is also a wanting to, and that you yourself are responsible for it. This is the real horror, not the devils with pitchforks, not lakes of fire, but the recognition that we forge our own chains. They didn't tell you in school that we choose our prisons. We are complicit. They didn't tell you that heaven and hell are places on earth. Sartre said, hell is other people, but Jung goes deeper. Hell is discovering that the other people are all aspects of yourself. Every tormentor wears your face, every demon speaks fluently with your voice. Jung continues, taking us deeper into the void. Hell is when you can no longer attain what you could attain. Hell is when you know that everything serious that you have planned with yourself is also laughable, that everything fine is also brutal, that everything good is also bad, that everything high is also low, and that everything pleasant is also shameful. Every certainty collapses, every category bleeds into its opposite, and then the final twist. But the deepest hell is when you realize that hell is also no hell, but a cheerful heaven, not a heaven in itself, but in this respect a heaven, and in that respect a hell. This is where language breaks down. We've moved beyond dualistic thinking into a realm where opposites reveal themselves as identical, consubstantial. The torture chamber is also the delivery room. The prison is also the chrysalis. Hans Urs von Balthasar, following the mystical visions of Adrian von Speer, proposed that Christ experienced hell not as victor but as victim, tasting the full horror of God abandonment. Conservative Catholics condemn this as heresy. But what if orthodox formulations can't contain the full reality? What if Christ had to experience hell as the damned experience it? What if omnipotence had to know absolute powerlessness? What if this is the price of true solidarity with fallen humanity? The medieval mystic Julian of Norwich received a vision of Christ in hell, and she reported, "But in God there may be no wrath as to my sight. For our good Lord endlessly hath regard to his own worship, and to the profit of all that shall be saved. With might and right he withstandeth the reproved, the which of malice and wickedness busy them to contrive and to do against God's will. Also I saw our Lord scorn his malice and set at naught his unmight, and he willeth that we do so. For this sight I laughed mightily, and that made them to laugh that were about me, and their laughing was a pleasure to me. I thought that I would that all mine even Christians had seen as I saw, and then would they all laugh with me. But I saw not Christ laugh, for I understood that we may laugh in comforting of ourselves and joying in God, for that the devil is overcome. And when I saw him scorn his malice, it was by leading of mine understanding into our Lord. That is to say, it was an inward showing of verity, without changing of look. For as to my sight, it is a worshipful property of God's that he is ever the same. Jesus accepted it, not endured it, not fought against it. He accepted. This is the horror that transforms horror, willing descent into the depths of human rejection, shame and abandonment. The 6th century sect called the Christolites believed that Jesus left his soul and body in hell, and only his divinity rose to heaven. The Church condemned this as heresy, but it points to a psychological truth. Something must be left behind in the depths. Some part of us must die absolutely for resurrection to occur. In Liber Novus, Jung speaks directly to our spiritual ambitions. Only the heroes say that they are fearless. But you know what happens to the hero. Heroes die, always, because they trust their own strength. Greek tragedy understood this. Hubris leads to nemesis. Pride goes before destruction. The hero's fatal flaw is the belief in his own sufficiency. Jung continues, "He who journeys to hell also becomes hell. Therefore, do not forget from whence you come. The depths are stronger than us, so do not be heroes. Be clever and drop the heroics, since nothing is more dangerous than to play the hero." This warning cuts against every instinct we have. We want to be spiritual warriors, conquering our demons and defeating our shadows. But Jung says, become clever instead. Cleverness here doesn't mean deception, but wisdom. Cunning in the original sense. The wisdom of Odysseus, not Achilles. Remember Jacob wrestling the angel? He wins through persistence. He gets wounded, permanently marked by the encounter, and his victory comes through holding on, not letting go until he receives a blessing. That's the cleverness Jung advocates. Luther understood this. When pressed about whether Christ descended in triumph or humiliation, he answered, "It is enough to preach the article to the lay people as they have learned to know it in the past from the stained glass and other sources." Sometimes wisdom means not probing too deeply. But why? Because as Luther elsewhere admits, I myself have been preaching and cultivating faith in Christ through reading and writing for almost 20 years, and still I feel the old clinging dirt of wanting to deal so with God that I may contribute something, and he must give me his grace in exchange for my holiness. The hero wants to earn salvation. The wise know it can only be received. The formula of Concord tries to systematize. We believe simply that the entire person, God and human being, descended to hell after his burial, conquered the devil, destroyed the power of hell, and took from the devil all his power. But Jung's warning stands. The depths transform us whether we consent or not. Better to go humbly than to be dragged. The mystic Meister Eckhart puts it clearly. God is not found in the soul by adding anything but by a process of subtraction. Every heroic addition must be stripped away. Every spiritual attainment must be surrendered. Only then can the real work begin. The 3 days' descent into hell during death describes the sinking of the vanished value into the unconscious, where by conquering the power of darkness it establishes a new order and then rises up to heaven again. That is, attains supreme clarity of consciousness, writes Carl Jung in Psychology and Religion. Notice the passive voice, the sinking. Not Christ sinks, but the value sinks. Something dies that must die completely. This is where Christian theology intersects with the deepest psychological insights. The ego, or the conscious structure we mistakenly identify as self, must undergo complete dissolution. Partial surrender and temporary humility are not accepted, only absolute death. The ancient Holy Saturday homily, whose author is unknown but whose wisdom is eternal, describes this cosmic pause. Something strange is happening. There is a great silence on earth today, a great silence and stillness. The whole earth keeps silence because the King is asleep. The earth trembled and is still because God has fallen asleep in the flesh and has raised up those who have slept from all ages. God has died in the flesh and hell trembles with fear. God sleeps. Reality holds its breath. In mythological terms, this is the moment between ages, the gap between eons. Egyptian mythology knew this pattern. Ra, the sun god, dies each night, battles the chaos Serpent Apophis in the underworld, and emerges reborn at dawn. But Christ does this once for all humanity. The silence matters. In our age of constant noise, we've lost appreciation for the profound silence that precedes transformation. The alchemists called it the nigredo, the blackening, the putrefaction that must occur before the new can emerge. John of the Cross describes this state in the dark night of the soul. In this sepulchre of dark death, the soul must lie until the spiritual resurrection which it hopes for. The tomb and the womb become one. Even nature teaches this pattern. The seed must fall into the ground and die, and the caterpillar must dissolve into undifferentiated goo within the chrysalis, and between what was and what will be lies a necessary nothing. The Celtic Christians had a term, thin places, where the boundary between worlds becomes permeable. Holy Saturday is the ultimate thin place, or perhaps more accurately, a no place where all boundaries dissolve. Pseudo-Dionysius, the Areopagite, the mysterious 6th century mystic, writes of the divine darkness that is beyond light. This is a light so bright it appears as darkness to our limited perception. Perhaps this is what Christ enters, the darkness that precedes new creation. Rising. Jung reveals the mechanics of resurrection. How else could Christ have saved his Antichrist? The question stuns like the godfly because it inverts what everyone thinks about salvation. We want to save ourselves from our shadow, not save the shadow itself. We want to amputate what's dark rather than integrate it. But Jung insists, wholeness demands inclusion, not excision. If Christ saves his Antichrist, if divinity redeems its own shadow, then our work becomes fundamentally different because we're now called to transform the shadow rather than destroy it now. Instead of eliminating what frightens us, we discover how it might serve a greater wholeness. Notice that Christ did not remain in hell, but rose to the heights in the beyond. Writes Jung again. The trajectory matters. We have to go through, not around. Down before up. Complete descent before authentic ascent. And what emerges from this journey isn't the old life restored, but something unprecedented. Like the grain of wheat that falls into the earth and rises as something entirely new. The Greek term for resurrection, anastasis, literally means standing up again. But after complete dissolution, what stands up is fundamentally transformed. The seed doesn't emerge from the soil as a larger seed, but as an utterly transformed structure. Root, stem, leaf, flower. Death is not reversal, but metamorphosis. The formula of concord, that Lutheran confession, struggles with the inadequacy of language. We believe simply that the entire person, God and human being, descended to hell after his burial, conquered the devil, destroyed the power of hell, and took from the devil all his power. But notice what it insists upon. Both natures, divine and human, make this descent. God tastes death. The impossible becomes necessary. What rises on Easter morning isn't simply Jesus of Nazareth resuscitated. What rises is the new Adam, the prototype of transformed humanity. As Paul writes in 1 Corinthians, the first man was from the earth, a man of dust. The second man is from heaven. Not restoration, but recreation. Not a return, but a breakthrough into unprecedented possibility. Medieval playwrights also intuited depths that theologians feared to name. The York cycle shows Christ leading our first parents in a triumphant procession while demons wail in frustration. But other mystery plays dare to imagine more. Cosmic litigation, where Satan claims legal rights over humanity, while Christ argues that the contract was obtained through fraud. Even more daringly, some plays show Christ debating with the damned themselves, offering redemption to those theology had declared irredeemable. The playwrights sensed what doctrine hesitated to proclaim. If Christ truly harrowed hell, then no soul lies beyond the reach of mercy. The Eastern Orthodox tradition speaks of theosis or divinization. It means participation in divine nature. Gregory of Nazianzus declared, "That which has not been assumed has not been healed." If Christ assumed even death and hell into his experience, then even death and hell become capable of transformation. This is the scandal that makes religious authorities nervous. Can we truly place limits on divine mercy? If death itself died in Christ's dying, if hell's gates shattered at his presence, then what imprisonment remains absolute? So here we are, friend, 2 millennia later. Why should this ancient mystery matter to us? Jung tells us directly in Ion, the scope of the integration is suggested by the descensus ad infernos, the descent of Christ's soul to hell, whose work of redemption also encompasses the dead. The psychological equivalent of this forms the integration of the collective unconscious, which represents an essential part of the individuation process. Every authentic spiritual journey requires this descent. We must face our hells, the parts we've buried alive, the aspects we've imprisoned in shame, the potentials we've declared dead, the addictions that grip us, the traumas that haunt us, the shadow selves we've crucified. But here's what changes everything. The path has been walked before us. The depths have been harrowed. The cosmic architecture of imprisonment has been compromised from within. We descend into territories already penetrated by transforming light. The Latter-day Saints now know better. In their Doctrine and Covenants, Joseph F. Smith describes his vision. From among the righteous, he organized his forces and appointed messengers, clothed with power and authority, and commissioned them to go forth and carry the light of the gospel to them that were in darkness. The harrowing continues. It's an ongoing process, which is why they practice baptism for the dead, extending redemption beyond the apparent barriers of time. Think about what this means. Every time someone descends consciously into their darkness, and every time someone faces their shadow with courage rather than flight, every time someone chooses integration over splitting, the harrowing continues. Christ's descent established a pattern, opened a way, and created a path through territories that once seemed impassable. Even Tolkien, that most Catholic of storytellers, couldn't resist this archetypal pattern. Gandalf falls into shadow with the Balrog, passes through fire and water, dies, and returns transformed. I am Gandalf the White, and I come back to you now at the turn of the tide. Frodo must enter Mordor itself. Aragorn walks the paths of the dead. The hero's journey invariably passes through the underworld because transformation requires an encounter with what we most fear. Modern psychology rediscovers what ancient wisdom always knew. Trauma therapists recommend titration or facing overwhelming experiences in small, manageable doses. The Desert Fathers practiced deliberate encounters with their demons. Buddhist Vipassana meditation turns towards suffering rather than away. The mystics sought the via negativa, the path of negation, of descent, of emptying. But there's a crucial difference between chosen descent and forced fall. Jung warns, "He who journeys to hell also becomes hell. Therefore do not forget from whence you come." And Nietzsche has a similar warning we all know. Beware that when fighting monsters, you yourself do not become a monster. For when you gaze long into the abyss gazes also into you. The depths possess their own gravity. Better to approach them with respect, with guides, with the accumulated wisdom of those who've made this journey before. We don't have to become heroes. Our personal hells will never be conquerable. Yet we can become conscious observers and actors in an ancient pattern of spiritual death and resurrection. Not to avoid the depths, but to trust that even there, especially there, transformation waits. When you strip bare your soul and then have the courage to ask yourself, who am I really? The epistle to the Ephesians talks about this cosmic scope. When he ascended on high, he led a host of captives, and he gave gifts to men. The prison itself becomes a prisoner. The depths once harrowed become the foundation for new heights. What once held us captive becomes the very ground of our liberation. Something strange is still happening, dear friend. The silence between the crucifixion and the resurrection is still sending reverberations. It asks, what waits in your depths for liberation? What aspect of your wholeness have you imprisoned? What resurrection will follow your necessary descent? The harrowing of hell is a living pattern. It's the shape of every genuine transformation. Divine love enters darkness fully and transforms the shadow from within. In the end, perhaps this forgotten doctrine is Christianity's greatest gift to human psychology. The promise that no depth lies beyond redemption's reach, no darkness too dense for light's penetration, no death so final it cannot become a gateway to unprecedented life. Christ harrowed hell once for all. But the harrowing of our personal hells, that work belongs to us, and we don't go alone. The path has been marked, the depths have been proven survivable, the resurrection has been demonstrated possible. Something strange is happening. The silence waits, the depths call. Will you answer?